Okay, so I was answering a question here from my friend John Nguyen, and I decided to shoot a quick video for him just because it was easier than typing out the response. And then I thought, hey, this might benefit other people as well, so I wanted to create something a little bit more formal in case it helps you. So here's the scenario. John emailed me and said, hey, well, he started with, dude, you're awesome, which is a good way to start if you're going to email me asking for help. And then the scenario is they've got a conference coming up in two different locations. He's building a campaign to capture people's information, and there's an option on that web form if they are going to bring guests, and they can bring up to 5 guests. So if they choose their option, we need to capture the information from the guests. So he said previously he did it through email, where based on how many guests they said they were bringing, he sent them an email. They had to reply with that information, and he said it worked, but it was just kind of sloppy and a little bit slower and confused people. So he wants to use web forms, and he's created the custom fields for guest name 1, guest name 2, guest name 3, email 1, email 2, email 3, phone 1, phone 2, phone 3, company, and so on. And then he just wants to use web forms to capture that information from the person who's attending. So here's what I've done. I built out the campaign here, and I'm in a test app that I have. And here's the event registration form. And then after we capture their information, we send them to one of 5 forms, right? So based on what they tell us on this first form, we're going to route them to another form. So we've got number of guests 1 through 5. And if they say, I'm bringing 5 guests, we direct them to this web form instead of a thank you page. If they say 4 guests, we send them here. 3 guests, we send them here. 2 guests, we send them here. 1 guest, we send them there. And if they say they're bringing nobody, they just get an email that says, hey, you're all set, and they get directed to a checkout page. So most people are familiar with the decision diamond, and I just have it set up to put them in one of those sequences based on what they told us as far as the number of guests they are bringing. So if 5, 5, if 4, 4, if 3, 3, so on and so forth. The sequence is really only going to come into play if they don't go through the process within 15 minutes. So I just really have a 15-minute delay and then a timer or an email that sends them back to that web form. So the tricky part of this is Infusionsoft only lets you put in one thank you page for the web form. So we can only send them to one of those 5 pages. So what I've done is I just added a little bit of JavaScript here to the thank you page, and it's what I call a variable redirect. So it's looking at this particular field, and then if the value of that field is 5, send them to this URL. And if the value is 4, send them to this URL, and 3, and 2, and 1. And if you have someone on your team who can write code, or if you know somebody who works with JavaScript, you can recreate this pretty easily. If you don't, you can shoot me a message, and I'll go ahead and share the snippet that I used with you. But the idea is after they submit this form, the thank you page is going to load. And because the contact details get pushed through to the thank you page, that's how you can merge in their information on this page. It's also going to merge in the number of guests into this little snippet. So as the page loads, it merges in their response from the previous page. And then based on what that number is, it'll wait a certain amount of time. I think I've got it at 2 seconds down here. And then it'll redirect there. So if they chose, I'm bringing 5 guests, they'll go directly to this form. Once they submit this form, which just basically has their guest's information, the thank you page of this one is the 4 web form for the 4 guests. So it takes them from 5 to 4 to 3 to 2 to 1. So if they just said I'm bringing 3 guests, then they'll start here and they'll go through the rest of the way. If they said they're bringing 1 guest, they'll just start here. And if they said 0, they'll go there. And the reason I have these connecting sequences in between is if at any point they stall out or they go from here and they don't submit the next one, then if 15 minutes goes by, it's just going to shoot them an email, and this links back to form number 3. So it says, hey, we still need information. You said you were bringing this many guests. You can add their details here. And that's part of the reason I pulled this note out. So that I could add all the different form URLs, because I needed them not only for the variable redirect up front, but I also needed them for each individual email to prompt them to go back to the right web form, and then I needed them for the thank you page to link 5 to 4 to 3 to 2 to 1. So it's not overly complex. It should be a fairly streamlined process. If they say I'm bringing 4 guests, they jump in and go 4, 3, 2, 1, and then it says all set. But as I'm describing this, I'm realizing we probably could have built 5 different forms that gather all the guest information on one form. So you probably could have just done all the guest info here for five different people, all the guest info here for 4, for 3, for 2, for 1. I think I was doing it this way because I used one set of custom fields. I just did that to save time. So rather than putting them on the same web form, I did 5 different web forms. And obviously in my scenario, the information would override it. But John was indicating he's created a unique set of custom fields for each guest that's going to be attending. So for his case, maybe just use 5 different web forms and route them to the appropriate web form and then be done with it. But the key component here is that variable redirect. And the last piece that I didn't mention on here is the variable redirect also gives you the option of, if none of these choices are selected, right? So if the default is selected or if they don't choose that. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. We've got else, and I just set it to Google. So that would be whatever your sales page is, right? If they just chose 0, you process them through right to the order page where they can register. And similarly, at the end of the one guest one, if they just make it to this point and they finish their registration, the thank you page here would also take them to a sales page of some kind if you need to collect information or payment from them. So thanks, we've got the info we need. I'm under the impression that we're charging them the same attendance fee, whether it's 1 or 3 or 5 guests. But if that's not the case, you just need to pass that variable through and set the quantity of tickets equal to the number of guests that they indicated they were bringing. So that's about the size of things for this campaign. There's a few different moving pieces, but the key element here is the JavaScript that we've added to the thank you page, which should control where they're headed. Okay, so let's test it. I've actually done a few tests and it wasn't working the way I expected it to. And what I discovered was on the web form itself, in that thank you page redirect, so in that variable redirect here, it wasn't actually passing the contact details through. So I had to add to each URL INF field email equals and merge in the email address to make sure it goes with. So I added that to the end of each URL. That wasn't part of the original recording, so I skipped over that. And what was happening was the new form, when I submitted it, wasn't being tied back to the original contact record. But now that I've got that added, hopefully it'll work. When I fill out this form, I'm going to choose one guest, and what we should expect is I'll immediately be added to this sequence and I'll immediately be redirected to this page. And so if I fill out that form right away, I'll be pulled out of that sequence and I'll be added to this one. If I don't fill out the form, 15 minutes later, I would get an email reminder. So here's the form, register for the event. Let's pop my information in. I don't need a phone number, and we'll just choose one guest and we'll click register. And thanks for registering, Gregory, and then it redirects. And you can see up here in the URL, it says INF field email equals greg@monkeypodmarketing.com. So if I were to view the source here, I would expect that the hidden field for email has probably been populated with the greg@monkeypodmarketing.com information that got carried through. So let's do J Gatsby. And guest email will just say j@gatsby.com, and the company is Gatsby Enterprises with no phone number. So I'm registering my guest, and then on the last page here, it just says, thanks, Gregory, we've got the info we need. So remember, it followed the contact Gregory all the way through. We're just populating additional details for Gregory's record. So if we look back here on the Performance tab, and we click refresh data, we should see, so Gregory is now over here in the all set sequence. I don't think I have much in that sequence, so he's just down there in the queued area. So that email processed, and then he quickly slipped down there. If we look at historical, we'll see a bunch of different numbers, and that's because of all the testing I was doing. But you can see I got this to work one time. So 5 people got stuck here, and I just removed them. And then the one person has made it through successfully to all set. And that would be the last one I just submitted. And if we take a look at that contact record, you'll see that I actually created a guest tab, which carries over the number of guests as well as the guest information, email, and company. And so what John was indicating is he's got 4 custom fields: name, email, company, and phone for each guest. So if there's 5 total potential guests, there will be 20 total custom fields, and they just fill in their information from one form to the next. So hopefully this helps give you some ideas if you're doing a similar situation or you need to capture additional details about guests. I like doing it this way personally because that way you have them tied to the original attendee, and once they pay, you know that those guests are all paid for as well. The other way of handling this would be to do unique web forms where the initial submitter fills out a separate web form and creates contacts for those other guests. But the struggle with that is you don't actually have permission from those individuals to email them. So in this scenario, we keep everything neat and tidy by tying it all back to the original record who submitted them. And the last thing I want to point out is if you do need to collect payment, on the tail end of this form, you could do a variable redirect based on the number of guests that they said they were bringing, and just send them to an order form with a preset number of tickets. So if they said they were bringing 5, you send them to an order form with 5 tickets fixed as the only thing they can buy there, and 4 and 3 and 2 and so on. Now, if they said they were only bringing themselves, then you would just use the variable redirect from this first form to direct them to a form that sells them 1 ticket. So I hope this helps. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me a message. Good luck. So after spending some time with this campaign and recording that whole video, I realized I think I can make it a little bit easier. So all we need to do is, if you're going to have a unique custom field for all your guests, then we don't need the forms to be linked together. You can just collect all of the information you need on a single form. So, for example, if you're capturing information for 5 guests, you would just put all 20 custom fields on there. If you're doing 4, you would put all 16 custom fields on there, and so on and so forth. So all you need to do is redirect them to a form that has the fields you need to capture. Let's do 5, 4, 3, 2, and then if they're bringing 1 guest, we'll do that as well. And then each of those can be funneled into this all set sequence, which lets them know that we're all set. So each of those forms can go directly into here. So after they register their guests or supply the guest information, no matter how many they're bringing, we just say, great, we're all set. And then the beauty of this scenario is you don't need the variable redirect for the thank you pages. From this one, you could just route them to an order form that collects payment for 6 guests because there's, 6 people, 5 guests in themselves. This one would direct them to an order form that collects payment for 5, for 4 people, for 3 people, for 2 people, and the variable redirect on this would collect payment for 1 if they said they were bringing 0 guests. So I think that simplifies it even further. The only drawback to that is that they're filling out a lot of information on one form for some of these, and that can be kind of overwhelming. It's easy to get distracted, so you might consider continuing on with the setup that I had originally because it captures 1 guest at a time, and it's a lot easier for people to fill in short, bite-sized forms than long, lengthy forms like this would end up being. But I wanted to present that as an additional option because I think that might be a little easier to wrap your head around than the initial structure I had.